Welcome to the AEN Stories channel.
I was 42 the day my house switched from a place we lived to a place where the walls remembered what we said. It didn't happen all at once. Houses don't break like that. The hairline first. A corner paint chip, a drawer that sticks, a laugh that hangs too long after the joke dies. You notice, and you decide it's nothing because deciding it's something would cost more than the week has in it. My name is Ethan. I fix copy machines during the week and coach JV baseball at the high school in spring because that's what men in towns like mine do when they want to both help and avoid talking. I met Paul in 9th grade woodshop when the belt sander tried to remove part of his thumb and he looked at me like, "Good story if it takes," and I said, "Or we can keep the thumb." We've been brothers since. Not by blood. By furniture moved and bad decisions survived. He's the guy who helped install the garage door that used to look at the street like it was tired. He was my best man with a speech I still hear sometimes when the house is quiet and I want to remember a version of us that fits in a single photograph. Megan is my wife. She's 37 and has one of those faces that looks like resolve taken to the bakery. We met when I locked my keys in a copier at a law firm and she laughed right in my face. I asked her out because being laughed at nicely is a rare gift. We got married young enough that people said, "You sure?" in the tone that means they're rooting for you but also for the story if it fails. Lucas is our godson, Paul is his godfather and I'm his goduncle by proximity. His mom, Tessa, is Megan's cousin. It's a long explanation at cookouts, usually reduced to, he's ours. Not ours. Ours. If this sounds like the start of a sermon, it isn't. Sermons have themes and closers. Real life has errands and receipts and a dog that eats a sock the same day the dryer quits. Paul is always at our house. He's the kind of person who just shows up with the right tool before you admit you need it. He'll text on my way to a problem you say out loud by accident. When Lucas started looking like high school at 13, Paul took him to the batting cages, to the comic shop, to a hardware store that makes men feel like they own more than they do. He called himself Uncle Paul and let Lucas call him an idiot anytime he tried to be cool. He is family. You don't say like family around here, that's for cards. You say family or you don't say anything. The first crack, if I trace it, was February. Lucas got quiet. He's 16 and quiet keeps different hours at that age, late night text face, morning shrug, after school naps in the wrong places. But this quiet had edges. He'd stop mid-sentence, as if words had turned heavy and the air charged him to hold them longer. He pulled away from Paul a little, which is like saying the tide pulled away from the moon. I thought, girlfriend. Or grades. Or some coach said something loud. I'm a man, our first list is short. Megan asked if I'd noticed. She was stirring pasta like it had done something to her. He's off, she said, a sufficient diagnosis in kitchens where hope and weather are the only prescriptions. I nodded and made a noise that said both I'll think about it and I already have. That Thursday, Paul came over to help me get the snowblower to forgive February. He stood in the garage with a socket wrench like a conductor. "Kid good?" he asked. He didn't mean kid good? The way some people do, fake interest, empty phrase. He meant Lucas. He meant, do I need to make a phone call in the parking lot after I pretend to buy gum? I said, he's trying on moods. Paul grinned. Boy size mood, he said, and made the sound he makes when he's ignoring his own advice. I didn't notice or didn't let myself. The day it all fell out, the sky was the kind of flat gray that makes you remember to be nice to cashiers. Sunday. Megan had a work thing in the afternoon, a strategy session that looked like a menu with too many fonts, and Paul said he'd swing by to help tweak the batting tee in the backyard. Lucas, who had taken to disappearing into headphones like they were a closet to Narnia, texted me, "Going to the Y. Be home by 3. I sent back a thumbs up because our language is mostly icons now. At 2:15 he walked in the front door like someone had pushed him. He dropped his duffel and stood in the entryway listening like a dog who knows which car is yours and which is not. I was in the garage, swearing at a bolt that thought it had tenure. I heard the door click again. I didn't look up. 10 minutes later he was in the garage doorway, pale, eyes wide, breathing like he'd sprinted across a field and then remembered not to look exhausted in front of the coach. "Hey champ," I said, turning a wrench without using it. That fast? Why, must be closed for a rich person event. He didn't smile. Can we talk? He asked, and I said sure, the way you do when your insides stand up and your outsides pretend they're sitting. We sat on the tailgate. He picked at a torn edge of the bed liner like he was mending it with worry. Is Mom home? He asked. She will be, I said. She said 4. He swallowed. We need to talk before she is, he said, and looked at the asphalt because I wasn't helping him with my face. Okay, I said, and waited, because boys can only put certain words into certain silences. He had that look teenagers get when they're about to break a window, and also a rule: terrified, righteous, relieved. I came home early last week, he said. Wednesday. I didn't tell anyone because I don't know. He laughed once, a horrible little sound people make when grief sits on their chest. I walked in and they were. He stopped. He didn't have the cinematic words. He didn't need them. Mom, he said. And Paul? If you tell me there's a right way to receive a sentence like that, I'll tell you 2 things: you're wrong, and I hope you never have to try. I don't remember standing up. I remember suddenly being taller than my son again, because pain shrinks you and rage lifts you, and neither makes you smarter. For a second, I saw the whole world through a red pane of glass. Then I remembered Lucas. 16. His hands shaking. The house at my back like a witness. Okay, I said, because sometimes the only word you can put on the table is one that doesn't scratch the wood. He nodded so fast I thought he'd break. I didn't know who to tell, he said. I thought you'd. He looked at me. He was trying to say I thought you'd hate me for telling you, and I thought you'd hate me for not telling you sooner, and I thought if I said it out loud it would become real. I put my hand on his shoulder like it had instructions. You told me, I said. That's the right thing. He cried then, an ugly, private cry boys are taught not to have. His shoulders moved the way they did when he was little and found out the dog on the corner bit. I didn't say it's okay, because it wasn't. I said, I'm here. He nodded. He took 3 breaths like he was learning how. We didn't go inside. I called Megan. It rang 4 times. I hung up. I texted, family talk. Here at 5. You, me, Lucas, and Paul. I typed his name and almost threw my phone at the driveway. I didn't. I put it in my pocket like a weapon I didn't want to carry. At 5, Megan walked in with a tote bag and a face that knows how to set down a smile the second it's wrong. She saw Lucas, red eyes, me, arms crossed in ways I reserve for snow days and funerals. What's going on? She asked, cheerful the way people are when they're fishing for a tone to match. Paul came 5 minutes later, as if the calendar had dared him. He carried a bag of takeout like he always does when he wants to be forgiven for being late. He smiled at Lucas. Hey kid, he said. Lucas looked at the floor. Paul looked at me. There were a dozen ways to play that moment wrong. He picked all of them. We sat at the kitchen table where we've made every budget we've blown. I could smell takeout and someone's perfume and the faint, permanent scent of dish soap. This is the part where, if it were a movie, someone would shout first and break a plate. Instead, the room did something worse. It asked me to start. Lucas, I said, do you want to say it, or do you want me to? He looked like a person at a cliff. I can, he said, and looked at Paul because sometimes bravery is choosing your target as well as your words. I came home early and saw you and Mom. Together. Megan's mouth made a shape I'd never seen. Paul opened his, closed it, put his hands flat on the table like a man preparing for a wave. Buddy, he started, and I had to grip the underside of the table because that word from his mouth was an insult I couldn't afford to pay for. Don't, I said. Ethan, Megan said, eyes bright with a kind of panic I have only seen twice on her face, once when Lucas was 4 and got lost in a Target, and once when the doctor said the word biopsy as if it were lemonade. It's not, it's complicated. Complicated is for taxes, I said. This is simple. Paul tried a different door. It isn't what? It is, Lucas said, sharp. It is what I saw. And then the room did the thing rooms do when truth enters and gossip leaves. It became tiny. There were 4 of us and every version of us that had ever sat there before layered on top: birthday candle smoke, Spilled milk, a Monopoly board that ended in someone sleeping outside, late bills spread like a map, a dog under the table hoping for mercy. Megan cried the way the people in commercials do before the camera cuts away to a different scene. "I didn't mean," she started, and Lucas laughed, a single note that sounded like a string breaking on his violin. "Don't," he said, and I saw my face on his face. "I wanted to tell you," Paul said. "He always has. He wanted to tell me when he lost a job in our 20s and borrowed $600 he never paid back. He wanted to tell me when he wrecked my car avoiding a squirrel and then told me the scratch was not from a squirrel. He wanted to tell me everything with a preface that made him noble for saying what he should never have done. How long?" I asked. 5 syllables that might be a fist. Megan answered because honesty sometimes arrives dressed as triage. "A few months," she said. The fluorescent light hummed. Outside, a neighbor's kid threw a basketball at a hoop and missed and tried again because that's what you do when people are watching and you have a window to pretend you're not watching them back. "Why?" Lucas asked, and that was the only question worth the room's oxygen. Not for me. For him. He wanted something he could put on the chart he uses to sort adults into tribes, the kind you trust and the kind you don't, the kind who will hurt you and then pretend they didn't, the kind who will tell you they did and ask you to be a grown-up about it. Megan took a breath that tried to turn into an explanation and did not. "I was lonely," she said, which, if you live long enough, is both confession and excuse and neither. "You work so much," she told me. "You and Paul were always your brothers, Ethan. You always had each other." I felt like the extra chair. "And your solution," I said, "was to remove a chair." Paul reached for her hand. The motion was small, practiced. Lucas watched it like it was happening underwater. "Stop," he said. Paul froze. "Don't touch my mother like you're helping." "I love you, kid," Paul said softly. Lucas flinched. "No," he said. "You don't get to say that here. You can pull a house down with your hands. You can also sit quietly while your life rearranges its furniture and you decide which pieces are worth moving and which belong on the curb." I stood up slowly. "We're not deciding everything tonight," I said. "We are deciding one thing: you don't come into this house again, Paul. Not while we figure out the part where I don't kill you." He nodded, small, grateful, which made me want to give in to the bad version. Megan looked at me. There were a dozen sentences between us that didn't need to be said. "I'm staying at my parents' tonight," she said. "I'll call tomorrow." "My parents," I said, and pointed at the calendar because manners have muscle memory. "They need to be here for the next part." She nodded like permission is a thing we remember even when we've forgotten respect. After they left, Lucas and I sat on the couch without speaking. The dog put his head on Lucas's knee because dogs audit neither motives nor bank accounts. "I didn't want to hurt you," Lucas said eventually, the sweetest and dumbest thing a kid can say. "You didn't," I said. "You did the job. You told the truth." He looked at me with a face that was half the baby he used to be and half the man he might become. "Are you going to hit him?" he asked, not like he wanted me to, but like he wanted to be spared from the surprise of it. "No," I said. "I'm going to ruin his calendar instead." The next night, we did the part I'd been rehearsing in my head for hours. We called Megan's parents and asked them to come over. Her mother, Diane, has a voice like floral wallpaper, busy, protective, slightly suffocating. Her father, Howard, is quiet until you need him and then he says exactly the number of words required. They sat at our table in the places they always sit. Diane to the left of the centerpiece she once bought us because a table without a centerpiece is just a counter, Howard at the end, where he can see everyone at once. Megan came with them. She looked 10 years younger and 10 years older, which is what regret does the first day after it gets a room. Paul did not come because he knows the part of the play where the father-in-law is a character with sharp tools and a short act. Diane started because she always does. "I don't believe it," she said. "Not Paul. He's Paul." She looked at Lucas like he'd misread the dictionary. "You must have misunderstood." "I didn't," Lucas said. The calm in his voice made me want to break something on his behalf. Howard sat forward. "We're not going to call the boy a liar," he said quietly. Diane blinked, surprised by the referee she hadn't asked for. "But Paul," she tried, "he's like a son," Howard finished, jaws set. "I know." He turned to Megan. "Tell me I don't have to say out loud in this house that the word like is doing too much work." Megan's eyes filled without her permission. "I'm sorry," she said, and it meant something because she said it to Lucas first. "Baby, I'm sorry." He looked at her with a kindness I did not deserve at his age. "You're my mom," he said. "You don't get to be my friend for a while." Diane made a small wounded sound. "He didn't mean," she started, but Howard's hand on her wrist was the period that sentence needed. "We're going to love you through this," he said to Megan, "and we're going to love Ethan through whatever he needs to do, and we're going to love Lucas without asking him to carry any of it." "Thank you," I said, meaning the philosophy, not the blessing. He nodded once, like men do at stop signs when the road is empty, but rules are how we keep the world from getting creative. We didn't decide the future that night. We decided logistics, the only decisions most families can actually implement. Lucas would stay with me. Megan would see him on a schedule that didn't require him to be a hostage. Paul was an uninvited noun. Diane cried in the kitchen where crying has more counter space. Howard hugged Lucas and told him he was proud of the way he had spoken. He shook my hand like we had just signed a treaty none of us wanted and all of us would enforce. I wish I could say the days got easier because we had a plan. They didn't. Plans are scaffolding. You still have to climb and not look down. I told the baseball team I needed a week. The assistant coach, a man whose idea of emotions involves a grill, said, "Got you," and then texted my assistant from the shop to cover a few afternoon calls because guys who don't talk about feelings always find a way to carry your box when your hands are full. Paul tried calling. I didn't answer. He sent a text long enough to be graded. "Brother, I know what I did. I know I wrecked it. I will spend the rest of my life trying to." I didn't read the rest. I know the meter of that kind of poem. I deleted it and felt both powerful and 12. Megan asked to meet at a coffee shop no one we know uses. We sat under a chalkboard menu that listed drinks like confessions. She said the word therapy like it was a password. "For me," she said quickly, "not to fix us. I don't get to ask for that." She told me she had ended it with Paul, a sentence that always carries less weight in the ear of the person not being slept with. "Okay," I said, and put my hands around a paper cup and felt nothing. "What do you want me to do?" she asked. The kind of question that makes you realize how much you hate being in charge of anything besides leftovers. "I want you to show up for Lucas," I said. "I want you to let Howard be mad and not fix him. I want you to not make this a story where you're the narrator. I want you to let me be angry and not insist on the apology tour as a speedrun to forgiveness." She nodded. "I can do that," she said, and I believed her, because sometimes belief isn't about the person in front of you, it's about the person you still want to be after this. We told Lucas together about the word divorce, not because papers were drafted but because the truth is a muscle that needs practice. He took it with a face that said, "I already did the hard part." He asked logistics. "Where will I sleep?" He asked Megan. "On the same bed as always," she said. "Without anyone else in the house I didn't invite," he replied, and she flinched like he had thrown a glass she was holding. At night, when Lucas fell asleep on the couch because the couch is where teenagers admit they're tired, I'd sit in the dark living room and listen to the house breathe. The dog would sigh in the place where Paul used to sit and watch football while explaining to me who the worst owners in sports are. The silence where his voice used to be was not the relief I expected. It was the ache you get when you stop carrying a weight and realize what it did to your spine. The hardest part was church. Not because I'm holy, but because we are people who nod at the right neighbors and stand at the right times and take casseroles like medicine. Everyone knows. They can't not. Paul sat 2 pews back with his mother one Sunday and I felt my knuckles forget their job. Lucas squeezed my hand once, and that single pressure reset the circuit. We left early. We ate pancakes for lunch like heathens. I didn't burn Paul down. I didn't trash his name to his boss or send screenshots to the group thread that would tilt the town. I considered it, and I won't pretend I didn't. But revenge is a second mortgage you only sign if you want to live there. I don't. One afternoon in April, I found Lucas in the garage, turning a bat in his hands like it was a problem he could solve by sanding. "You want a hit?" I asked. He shrugged, the universal teenage no/yes. We went to the park. We took grounders until my back told me it was 42 and my heart told me it still remembered 17. He lined a dozen balls into the gap like he'd been storing them up. When we were winded, we sat on the bench and looked at nothing together. "I thought he was on our team," he said finally, meaning Paul. "So did I," said. "How do you know next time?" he asked. "You don't," I said. "You just keep your eye on the ball. And when it hops funny, you get your body behind it so it can hit you in the chest instead of going through your legs." He smirked. "You're going to make everything about baseball?" "Everything worth learning is already there," I said, and he rolled his eyes in the affectionate way that tells me we are okay at least for the rest of the hour. Megan kept showing up. Quietly. She sat in the bleachers at Lucas's games without insisting on being seen. She stood at the top of the stairs on Tuesdays and Thursdays when it was her time and didn't step into the house until Lucas said, "Come in." She told her parents the truth the same way 2 or 3 more times because people hear what they can manage, not what you say. Diane stopped making Paul-shaped excuses out loud. She started making dinners that fed us on nights I forgot to be organized. Howard kept being the adult I now realized I'd been practicing to be around my entire life without knowing it. In May, Paul sent a letter. Handwritten. I opened it. He said things I knew he would say. He used my name too often, as if ownership of it had ever been his. He said he would leave town for a while. He asked if he could talk to Lucas man-to-man. I asked Lucas. He said, "Not yet." We mailed nothing back. Silence can be a full sentence if you let it. Summer came and stretched the day in ways that make towns like ours feel both bigger and smaller. Lucas got a job scooping ice cream at a place where the line hosts all the gossip worth ignoring. Megan and I filed papers because sometimes the kindest thing you can do with a marriage is stop making it try. The lawyer talked about assets like furniture at an estate sale. There wasn't much to divide besides schedules and photo albums and the part where we make sure Lucas never looks at our mess and thinks he was the reason we stopped sweeping. I wish I could tell you I forgive Paul. I don't. Not yet. Forgiveness isn't a trophy you earn by apologizing long enough. It's a porch light you leave on when you're ready to sleep. Mine's off. Maybe one day it won't be. Maybe that's another sermon. Today is a Tuesday and the dryer squeaks and Lucas needs a ride to a thing he didn't mention until now and I have to fix a scanner that refuses to accept magenta as a concept. Life doesn't pause and wait for your wisdom. But this I do know, when your godson finds the worst truth and brings it to your table, you say thank you. Not then. Not to his face. But you say it somewhere in your chest where gratitude and grief share a drawer. Because he brought you the only thing that lets you rebuild, facts. Because he saved you from your better story. Because he's watching and he needs to know that men don't disappear when the scene goes bad. They point at the plate. They set their feet. They keep their eye on the ball even when it hops funny. They let it hit them in the chest if that's what it takes to keep it in front of them. The other night, I found a photo on my phone from last summer, Paul on our deck flipping burgers with a look like he invented charcoal, Megan laughing at something Lucas said about how adults never get the jokes that matter. I almost deleted it. I didn't. I slid it into an album called Before. Not because I want to live there, but because I want to remember the full sentence of our life. It had a first clause that was good. It has a second clause that is honest. It will have a third that we will write with better pens. Lucas came in from work smelling like sugar and effort. He dropped his bag and said, "We won 83, about a game I couldn't make because I was stuck in a supply closet arguing with a machine. 2 doubles," he said, trying to be casual and failing. I high-fived him like it was the invention of bread. He grinned. The dog barked for no reason. Megan texted to say, "Tell him I'm proud," and I did, because that's the kind of message you deliver even when you'd rather be dramatic. We ate leftover pasta with too much pepper. We watched a stupid show about people buying houses with opinions. Lucas made fun of everyone on screen with a cruelty I approve of in safe zones. We laughed. The house listened. The cracks are still there if you know where to look. I do. I also know how to spackle. I also know some cracks don't need covering. They tell you where the weight used to sit and remind you where not to put it again. And when I turn off the lights, I can hear my son breathing down the hall, and it is the one sound that has not changed. I stand there for a second longer than I need to and I let it steady me, the way a metronome steadies a song, the way a bass keeps a fence standing even after the storm, the way a simple truth steadies a life that thought it needed a bigger idea. Thank you for listening my story. If you want more raw, real, and gripping stories like this one, subscribe to the AEN Stories channel. Your support keeps these stories alive.